Hey, and welcome back to another GoPro battery test video. This is part 2 of 3, and I'm just about done wrapping up my battery testing. All of my tests have been performed on the GoPro Hero 8. The cameras and batteries are basically new and purchased within the last 1 to 3 months. The first video, up here in the top right, covered battery drain with different settings such as beep volume, display timeout, brightness, and LED settings. These are the basics, and so for this round of testing I cover some of the remaining general settings. Those are video compression, GPS, voice control, and wireless. Then of course the final showdown with the different settings. Note that the final settings I selected in the first video do carry over here. Here's a quick review of those settings so we have a baseline for today. With that out of the way, let's review the setting definitions for today's settings so you understand the impact of turning them both off and on. First, the video compression setting. Some quick Googling leads to GoPro's community website and an explanation of this setting. In short, the main point is newer PCs will support HEVC only, and older PCs need the HEVC plus H.264 codec in order to play back the files recorded. If your PC doesn't support HEVC only, you'll get a codec error and only audio will be played with a blank video image. This doesn't hurt your file, you just can't see and view the video. I recommend you take a video with both settings and test on your devices. The reason you would set to HEVC only is the outcome will result in smaller file sizes. How much smaller? Well, we'll see in just a minute during testing. Also note that with either setting, I noticed no difference in sound quality or video quality. It's simply the codec that's used in order for playback. The second setting I want to explain is GPS. This setting just results in what statistics the GoPro collects whenever it's recording. So with GPS enabled, it'll connect to the GPS satellite and track things such as speed, GPS pathing, distance, altitude, elevation gain. While this could add a neat overlay to your video depending on the subject matter, it can only be accessed using the GoPro's quick desktop app. If you use another editor, you can't access this GPS information. Now there are third-party GPS extraction tools covered in this thread that I'm going to highlight here, but use at your own risk. For this video, we are covering only the impact of this setting on battery life, so for now, we'll just stick to that. Okay, for the test results. In part 1, I went through each test to explain the process, but I won't be doing that for this round. If you want to better understand my controlled methods and carry forward process of settings, then review part 1 and head back here. So now the results. Tests are starting at number 6. I did this as the first round of tests ended at test 5, and we are continuing on from there. Test 6 was video compression. This didn't seem to impact battery usage at all, but did result in a smaller file by about 2 gig. I wouldn't say this is significant, but it is a smaller size. My PC and iPad both can play HEVC only, and I had no playback issues excluding the H.264 codec. Therefore, I will be setting my GoPro to the HEVC only setting. Test 7 was GPS. The only way for this test to be accurate was with movement. So I walked the neighborhood. My neighborhood has hills, so elevation changes, distance, speed, etc. were all tracked. I started this test from the previous, therefore battery started at 38% for both, and then I gauged this test really on runtime. With GPS off, I got 28 minutes versus GPS on at 25 minutes. At full battery, you could math that out to be a difference of 6 to 8 minutes total. So for my videos and use case, I'm definitely going with GPS off. Carrying on to test 8 was voice control, and I talked to my GoPro for about 30 minutes. The GoPro was responsive, and I didn't have to repeat commands, so overall the feature works really well. It's just not something I see myself using. So while battery life was minimally different at say 1%, I knew going into the test that the outcome would be me turning this feature off anyway. Test 9 was wireless. This test had me doubting everything in all honesty, and if I'm even totally honest, each test I can kind of see where some of these settings really have an impact more so from heat of the camera I'm using, which battery I'm using. I think all of these have a play in the settings. Even as controlled as I've tried to be, there's still variance in there that's naturally going to happen. Therefore, regardless of the result, you have to assume that wireless would consume more power than wireless being off. But as the same with test 8, regardless of the outcome here, wireless will remain on for my GoPro, so I'm able to use the GoPro app and continue using the remote. Test 10 is the final test and the showdown of the new settings versus the opposite settings. I ended this test with a 2% difference in battery. Some of the settings above as indicated will stay set on my cameras regardless, but I feel this testing brought out valuable information for both GPS and video conversion. Therefore, I'll settle that the testing was worth the effort. As with part 1 testing, Part 2 further indicates that the majority of the battery consumption is likely going to come down to recording quality and video settings like Hypersmooth. This will be covered in Part 3 to wrap up settings testing. So at this point, between Part 1 and Part 2, we've saved an estimated 5 to 8% total battery life and a recording time estimate of 6 to 10 minutes. I stress the term estimation as I feel I cannot say conclusively that you will see the same battery percentages or camera runtime impacts that I have. Do I think you'll gain recording times by following the recommended settings from Part 1 and Part 2? Well, that's an easy yes. How much gain? Well, that's the variable. For that, I'll happily take comments if you've implemented these settings and what your result is, whether measurable or perceived. That said, I'll close with a real-world example myself. I have the settings from Part 1 and Part 2 on all my cameras. I shot some off-road footage this past weekend. Since making the setting changes, I felt the cameras went longer during a single recording than my previous experience. I went to check the cameras on one occasion, and I retrieved all of them to note that they were still capturing footage. I was surprised to find them still recording. Each camera recording for more than 45 minutes, outdoor settings, with movement, and at 4K 60 FPS. And that's good enough for me. And that will do it for today's video. Don't forget to drop a like, comment, and lend us a subscription. Now get out, go do what makes you happy.